Lisa,
Yes, baby girl.
when I grow up, I want to be a menace to society.
Then so shall you be. Hey, this is Lisa Landry. Welcome back to A Menace to Society. I am so delighted to speak with today's guest. He is an author and he's also a professor of English at Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana. Please welcome to the podcast, Zachary Lazar.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be here.
It's so good to have you. You've been busy, and I'm so excited we could finally connect. I know that you're a very distinguished author. You've got 5 books. The last one that just came out is Vengeance, yeah?
Yeah.
And you also teach English. But, the reason I really want to speak with you, and we'll get to all the rest of your great works later in a moment, you teach creative writing to people who are locked away in penitentiaries.
That's right.
How did that come about?
It came about because of my last book. Actually, although it's a novel, it started out as journalism. There's a famous prison in Louisiana called Angola Prison, because that's the city that it's in, the town rather. I spent a week there, kind of 24/7. The people incarcerated there were putting on a passion play, the story of Jesus. While they were rehearsing for that play and then performing it, I was just hanging around talking to everybody. And so I got to know a lot of people, really. I interviewed about 40 people day in and day out over the course of that week. And I also became friends with a woman named Kathy Fontenot, who's one of the wardens at Angola. She was the one who allowed me to be there. And I just met a lot of creative people who were in prison while I was doing that. I wanted to figure out some way to tap into that creativity or help it along somehow. And then Kathy Fontenot switched positions. She became a warden elsewhere, and we started talking about doing a creative writing class there. We just did it. That was about 3 years ago now. I think I taught the class 5 semesters. It's a semester-long introductory creative writing class, which is half students from Tulane and half students who are incarcerated. The first couple times we did it was in Lafayette Parish Prison, and now we're doing it in East Baton Rouge Parish Prison. And the Tulane students and the people in prison do the same reading and writing assignments for a whole semester. And they exchange work every week. They critique each other's work every week. And it's been a very rewarding thing, I think, for all people involved, myself and the students.
So how did you come up with the idea of bringing students to the prison to work with people who are currently incarcerated?
Well, really, when I was formulating ideas about how to do this kind of class, at Tulane where I teach, there's a mandatory service learning requirement. Service learning is a kind of class where you're learning in the traditional academic sense of the word, but you're also doing some sort of community service at the same time. So there was a mechanism at Tulane that I knew I could just sort of take advantage of. Once I thought about doing this as a service learning course, it just became pretty obvious to me that it would be super valuable for the Tulane students to be in a class with incarcerated people and vice versa. And that became a really important part of the class. I think it's unusual. It means that I'm not just going into the prison myself and doing it that way. I'm actually bringing this whole other cohort with me. It makes it so it's not simply a class about creative writing skills, but it's about connecting with other human beings from all different walks of life.
The people who are coming who are students are learning something about giving back to a community, having a new relationship with people they may not have ever experienced or come to know.
That's right. One of the amazing things about the class, and it was one of the first things that happened the first semester, the first day, I can't bring them all in the same room very often because the prisons are far away, but we go 3 times throughout the semester. I bring the Tulane students over there, and we're all in the room together. And the very first time I did that, I didn't know how it was going to go. And I was kind of anxious about how it was going to go. I had no idea. And so I came with some silly ideas about how to break the ice. And what ended up happening, though, is that at first the incarcerated folks were seated separately from the Tulane students. And I asked if we could just scramble it up and get them all together. And they said, yes, they could do that. And I turned my back for a second to go and see what my little icebreaker ideas were. And by the time I turned back around, they were all already talking to each other with kind of unbelievable comfort levels, joking and just making small talk. That is at least as valuable as the writing part of the class.
And what are some of the things you find when you go to these settings where you got students and people who hopefully will get out one day and they'll be able to use that creativity in admirable ways instead of making mistakes or being subjected to whatever they've gone through before and ended up in prison? What's like the biggest surprise?
I think the biggest surprise maybe is that both sides of this equation, Tulane and people in prison, have a lot more in common than anybody thinks they do. And there are people in Tulane, for example, who have family members who are incarcerated. And, of course, there are people who are incarcerated who have been to college. And I think another part of the question you were asking me was sort of what's the outcome when folks get out of prison, what happens? And that's, I've been able to follow some of that. And it's been a mixed bag, but I know that one of my former students she went back and finished her undergraduate degree and is now getting a master's in English. So certainly I did something positive for her. It's not really meant to be a kind of pragmatic thing. It's meant to be more of a spiritual thing, I guess. I think that the reading and the writing that we do in the class is focused on writers who have sort of a good eye, a good, clear view of what's happening in the world. They're able to see themselves and other people with a perceptiveness and an insight that is valuable in life. And then I think the more of that you have, the easier it is to deal with your problems. So many of the people in the class on the prison side just happen to be artistically minded people. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. And what that means is that before they went to jail, they were musicians. If they were visual artists, they were tattoo artists. If they were poets, they were hip-hop artists. It's Louisiana, so artistic pursuits are kind of a widely available thing.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it really is true. So it was just kind of, it's amazing, especially when I was doing it in Lafayette, because it's Cajun country, and the language that was being just used, it was a really rich vernacular. It was great.
You've accomplished a lot. You're a very young man to have all these accomplishments, Zachary. When did you start writing? Have you always been a writer?
Well, since college, I started really writing seriously in my last year of college, and then I published my first book when I was in my late 20s. It's not an easy path, so I decided I want to be a very different kind of writer after that. And so I spent 10 years breaking it all down and building it back up again. So there was a big 10-year gap there. There wasn't any publication going on. But I'm glad that I did that. It wasn't enjoyable at the time, but it made me a much better writer. And it's what led me into this. The books that I've been writing for the last, how many years now, 15 years or so, have increasingly been books that, even though they're fiction, they're books that take me out into the real world, take me into countries, physical places, places like prisons, that I never would have gone if I hadn't been writing books. And so I've always loved to sit in a room and imagine stuff, but there's something kind of, in addition to being wonderful, there's something a little bit limiting about that, isolating about that. And so to be able to use fiction as a way to get out into the world has been really, really rewarding, gratifying. I just got back from a trip to Mexico because I'm working on something that has to do with Mexico, and I'm learning Spanish because I want to know Spanish to be able to write this book. So it's kind of like a little vehicle that takes me to different places in the world.
What do you think of teaching? Do you ever miss it when you're out in all these different countries getting ideas and working on stuff? Do you miss Tulane? Do you miss New Orleans? Do you miss the beignets and the music, or what?
Well, I'll be honest. I miss New Orleans for sure. I really love that city a lot. And whenever I'm away from it, I miss it. Teaching it can be very rewarding, but it's a job. It's work. And so I would not be truthful if I said I missed it. But, as a job, I wouldn't trade it for any other job. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. I've had some great great students, some of whom have come out of the prison class and who have gone on to take my advanced classes.
That's fantastic. That's really great.
Yeah. It's been an interesting journey. This last book with the incarceration as a subject. I was just on the phone before we got on the phone with a publisher at a place called Agate Books, who was publishing a novel by a friend of mine who's incarcerated in Angola. He's a guy I met back in 2013. And he wrote this novel that he sent me several years ago now. And I didn't know what to expect. I knew that he was a really interesting and smart guy. But this novel came to me in the mail, and it was on like legal-sized paper, and it was handwritten in a ballpoint pen, which meant that he had actually sat down and transcribed a copy for me of this novel that was more than 300 pages long. And the handwriting was really beautiful. He was very careful and meticulous. Anyway, I started reading that book, and I was just blown away. It was really, really good. And after many years of struggling to find this guy, a publisher, I finally did so. And I was just on the phone with the guy. He's going to start the editing process right now, this summer, and the book's supposed to come out in a year.
That's fantastic. Yay.
Yeah.
Your books are fantastic, and you're such deep. You're very deep. You're a very deep individual. You're a very complex gentleman, Zachary.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I guess, yeah. I use the books as a space in which to think about, really serious stuff. And I think that's, valuable. I don't think our culture has a whole lot of space for thinking about really serious stuff. But I think people are faced with very serious stuff all the time. And so it's nice that there is a little sanctuary space to be able to do that. And I've heard back from enough readers from my books to know that the connection is happening, that there actually is a readership for this kind of work. But, the root of it, as you probably know, is the subject of one of my books, actually. My father was murdered when I was a child. And, it kind of doesn't get any more heavy or serious than that. And you have kind of a choice, I think, even as an adult, becoming a writer, you have a kind of choice to decide how much of that you're going to let into the work. Is that going to be part of your work? Is it going to be something you push away, something you act against, or not? And the first book I wrote, it was kind of pushing it away, reacting against it. I was trying to be more of a comic writer, actually. I'm trying to bring some more of that back into my work right now. But eventually I decided to really just stop pushing away from it and to really just go deep with it. I'm really glad I did that. It wasn't fun, but it was kind of illuminating. And it's what led me to the prison book too, because one thing leads to another. When I moved to New Orleans, I met a very good photographer named Deborah Luster, who, like me, had a parent who was murdered, and her photography reflects that. A lot of it is about crime and punishment. She does a lot of prison work. Anyway, there was this crazy situation where people, when I first moved to New Orleans, people kept saying, you should meet Deborah Luster, you should meet Deborah Luster. And it turns out that, yeah, she had a parent who was murdered, but what's more bizarre than that is that both her mother and my father were murdered in the same city, Phoenix, Arizona. They were both contract killings. The same detective worked both of these cases for a while. I had written a book about it, so Deborah knew all of that when we met. But then after many, many years had passed, neither of us is from New Orleans, and we both ended up living there. And the very first day we met, we had lunch, and then we went back to her house. She said, you want to go up on the roof? I was like, oh, all right. I'm actually afraid of heights. I wasn't that excited on the roof, but I said, let's just do it. Anyway, once we got up on the roof, you could see my roof. That's how close we lived together in New Orleans. And she was going to the prison to do work about this passion play I was talking about before. And, she said, do you want to come with me? And I said, absolutely. And it was interesting because we didn't know each other at all, really. We're very good friends now, but we just did that, jumped in. And I thought we would go for like a day or two. And as I said before, we ended up spending a whole week there, spending the night at the prison, and really immersing ourselves in it. I don't know. I mean, I never would have predicted doing any of this work 15 years ago or whatever. Life does present you with interesting choices sometimes if you're lucky. And
well, yeah, but you don't say no either. You're one of those fearless types. You might be a quiet type, but you're also courageous. I am very sorry about your dad. That's horrible, and I can't imagine that grief.
Well, it was a long time ago. I was a child, but it is part of who I am. And so, again, what I was trying to say before, I'm not sure if I got it out, but I think when something like that happens, it's traumatic, but it also is kind of weirdly shaming in a way that's hard to describe. But I think it's hard to talk about it because it's so heavy.
Yeah.
And almost is stigmatizing in a weird way. Telling someone that I wrote a book about my father's murder, it's like dropping this heavy weight on them. But what I'm really saying is that I actually had this incredibly liberating experience where I spent 4 years looking at things I'd never looked at before, and understanding things I'd never understood before, asking questions I never asked before, and instead of being controlled by this stuff that I didn't understand, and now I have an understanding of it, and I'm in control. I can go forward. To me, it was valuable, and again, with the weirdness of life being what it is. When that book came out, there was a review in the New York Times, and I got a weird email from someone who said, "I've been looking for you for a long time. I saw your book in the New York Times," and I said, "What are you talking about?" And it turns out that this woman was my long-lost half-sister that I never knew about. I never knew that she was out there. And she heard about me through this book, and she found me. We became half-siblings. We have a relationship now. We see each other. So life is crazy. Life is crazy.
That's I don't even know how to put that into words. Like, what are the odds? What are the odds you meet this person who had the same horrible experience that you've had of having a parent murdered, and you guys end up in the same place, y'all are neighbors, and then you find a half-sister because you had the courage and the intellectual curiosity and the creative mind to sit down and kind of try to figure out a morass of emotions, I would imagine, and bunches of different police reports and all kinds of stuff. And
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was really intense doing the research for that book. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it's triggering. I would be triggered.
Yeah. It was. The way I coped with that was I worked really fast. Like it was kind of crazy, but I immersed myself in it, and the story ended up being really, really complicated. And I had to educate myself on all kinds of criminological things, but also legal things, the real estate business, all kinds of stuff that I had no understanding of whatsoever at the beginning, and then had to get up to speed with. And I think I just was kind of manic about it, and I wrote that book very quickly. And I know why, because I just needed to upload it all into my brain and then spit it out as soon as I could. A, before I forgot it, but B, just so I could purge,
Yeah, sure, of course. I'm sure the trip to Mexico was a lot more fun. Maybe not as life-changing, but...
It was certainly more relaxing than that, yeah. I've always been fascinated with Mexico, and that's why I'm writing about it now. I have been going there for many, many years. I don't know, back in 2015, my wife and I had this amazing opportunity to go travel. I won this prize that I didn't expect to win, so it was just this windfall came, and so we went to Brazil for at least a month, a long time, and it was an incredible, incredible trip. And then at the very end of that, we tacked on a week in Mexico City, where I'd been a million times, and even after all that wonderful and incredible stuff that we saw in Brazil, Mexico City still was making this strong impact on me, and it was like, oh, you have to write about that. You have to understand this. What is that? Because Mexico City is wonderful, but it's also, there's been times when I'm there, that time when I was there, the air pollution was really bad, and I could barely breathe. I had to carry around a bottle of eye drops because the air was so bad.
I didn't know it was that bad. I've never been to Mexico City, but I've seen news reports. I didn't know it was that horrible.
It's not always that horrible. I was just there last week, and it wasn't like that at all. It was wonderful. But yeah, when it gets bad, it's really bad because it's very high in elevation, and it's surrounded by mountains, and so the air just gets trapped. There's no place for it to go, and there's a lot of cars.
So I guess you can't tell me this, but do you have a favorite book of your 5 babies?
Oh wow. No.
Does an author, I know, I was just thinking, does an author ever admit, yeah, I have a favorite? Because that'd be like, you know, a parent saying, yeah, the baby's my baby, or I can't stand the oldest one, he should move out.
It is a lot like that, actually. I don't know. And maybe it also just changes. I think right now, my favorite, it's just, just having this little feeling, would be a book that it's kind of weird, one of the weirdest of them all. It's called I Pity the Poor Immigrant. It's a book about Israel, but I really like it because it's a very complicated book, so it's really hard to put together. It was, I don't know if I would be able to do something like that again. I don't know if I'd be able to do it. So I just feel like, from a writer's perspective, like that I had to have a lot of chops to do that book. So I think it's kind of, I like it. I like it. The latest one is Vengeance is probably the best one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean I like it the most. It was really not fun to write. It was probably the least fun to write, even more so than my book about my father. I felt a huge responsibility to the people that I had talked to in prison. I really didn't want to screw it up, and I knew that it would be easy to screw it up because I'm so different from them. And so I was just really anxious the whole time I was doing it. I'm writing a new book now that is pure fiction, and I feel very liberated. I don't have any of that sense that I need to be getting the story right to preserve the dignity of some actual person out there.
That's got to be very freeing, because you don't have to preserve somebody's integrity or write them in a certain light.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I can see why you're getting excited about this new one. Yeah. Set in a city that you love, and you get that freedom.
Definitely.
So when can we expect it? Do you have like a sort of schedule, or how does that work? I know you have dates that you have to provide stuff over to your editors and stuff, but do you have, like, if you have to have your book out by X date, do you ever move it?
Yeah, so I've never been in a situation where I've needed to adhere to a schedule like that. I can kind of just do it at my own pace, which it's great in some ways. But what's bizarre is that there's always this urgency. You want to get it done as fast as you can. I don't know why. It probably makes sense to just take it easy and slow down, because I don't have a deadline for this book. But I would like to try to maybe get a draft of it finished by the end of this summer before my classes start up again. Because there's always, no matter how weird and idiosyncratic a book is, I always have this paranoid idea that there's some other guy out there writing the exact same kind of thing.
Collective unconscious. Yeah, people tap into the same ideas sometimes.
Yeah.
And you are one of those kind of connected brothers, because you're one of those people who, I mean, I don't know you, but you seem like a real deep thinker who kind of goes with whatever kind of happy chaos might be coming to your doorstep.
That's true. Yeah, it's true. And sometimes there is another person out there doing some of the same stuff. I mean, I don't know if you've heard about Rachel Kushner's book, The Mars Room, the prison novel. Yeah, it did super well. It was a great book. But she's a friend of mine, and I remember we both decided to do prison books at exactly the same time without knowing that we were going to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was weird. And it took us the same amount of time to do them, and they came out the same year. It was synergy. So I know her new book has nothing to do with my new book is like now. So that's good.
Do you think, this is a random, all my questions are random, but this one I would imagine is super random. Do you think that because of these books that are coming out and so many people in America have been locked up,
Uh-huh.
do you think this is all tying into prison reform somehow?
Well, I hope so. I mean, it's hard to say where we are with that right now. On the federal level, I don't feel like we are moving forward with that. I do feel like on the state level that we are, and that's actually where it's most important, because a lot of people don't realize, I think, is that it's actually the states who have the ability to make changes that will affect incarceration, because most people are serving state sentences, they're not serving federal sentences. And so I'm getting caught up in a lot of legal gobbledygook, but what I can say is that in Louisiana there has been some movement forward, which has been encouraging, and there's a lot of organization going on there, a lot of people advocating for these things. And one of the things in Louisiana is the issue of parole. There are several categories of crimes that are such that you're not eligible for parole. You can't get parole. And that's starting to kind of change, I think. And people are starting to get pardon recommendations. In fact, I have a friend who just had his life without parole sentence commuted to a situation where he would be eligible for parole in a couple of years. So there are these little movements happening. We just got unanimous juries in Louisiana, for example, which is a big step. It's kind of like a little bit of inside baseball, I think, the question about criminal justice reform, because there's a lot of components to it. But yeah, I think that the awareness is definitely more there than it ever was, and that these books are playing a part in that.
Thank you so much, Zachary Lazar. That's ZacharyLazar.com, and you spell his name Zachary, Lazar, ZacharyLazar.com. Please find me at LisaLandry.com. You can sign up for my YouTube channel. We got some great podcasts coming up and also some videos. Shout out Ari Bear. I love you so much. We should go to Louisiana. I don't think we're going to spend a lot of time in Angola, but you never know what's going to happen.